views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. There are many aspects of life in the Bronx that have been affected by the pandemic and then the onset of Omicron. And among those items are small businesses. How are Bronx small businesses doing? I'm venturing to say there are 15,000 small businesses in the Bronx. And I'm venturing to say every one of those 15,135 of them has been affected by the pandemic. Unfortunately, conditions and situations for the 43% of them, the 6,500 minority-owned businesses, have not always been healthy anyway. So you can only imagine what the conditions are like for small businesses in general and minority-owned small businesses in the Bronx. Tonight we have three excellent experts to talk about exactly what I was just talking about. So I'm going to introduce them individually. Up first, Jonathan Bowles is the Executive Director of the Center for an Urban Future. Mr. Bowles, nice to have you with us, sir.
Great to be here.
And from WHEDco, and I told her it's one of my favorite organizations in the world, so there you go. The Vice President of Community Development is our buddy Kerry McLean. Nice to see you, Kerry.
Good to see you as well, Gary.
And the Executive Director of the Morris Park BID is Dr. Camelia Tepelus. Dr. Tepelus, nice to have you with us.
Thank you for the invite, Gary.
So let's start off with our friends over there at the Center for Urban Future, and I want to get a hold of it. They put out this report, which is called No Small Relief, Strengthening New York City's Most Vulnerable Small Businesses. Within there, they made 10 recommendations for Mayor Adams and the City Council to help minority-owned businesses do better in many different ways, specifically to help energize communities. We're going to talk to Ms. McLean about that in a moment. But Mr. Bowles, why don't you explain a little bit about what made you and your organization think that we need to focus on minority-owned businesses with a report like the one we were just talking about?
You know, it is so great that in recent months, we've had a lot of discussion about the need for inclusive recovery from this pandemic and building a more equitable city. And my colleagues and I at the Center for an Urban Future really believe that supporting and strengthening the city's minority-owned businesses needs to be a big part of that. We know how important minority-owned businesses are to the Bronx. You said it, you know, almost half of all businesses in the borough, in the Bronx and citywide, many of these businesses were hit disproportionately hard during the pandemic. And our report aims to have a blueprint for new city officials, for the mayor, for city council members to come out and make sure the city's minority-owned businesses can not only fully recover from the depths of this pandemic, but also to come back even stronger. And I think one of the big findings of our research, and we spoke to Kerry and so many other small business experts around the city, including a lot of minority-owned business owners themselves, and we really found that a lot of minority-owned businesses in New York were fragile even before the pandemic. So for us, it's not just getting businesses through the pandemic, not just helping them survive, but really helping them come back stronger.
What's interesting to me, and I don't want to make any assumptions, why focus on minority-owned businesses? And you've made the statement, I made the suggestion at the outset of the show that they are not doing well and were not doing well. Why is that? Why is there that divide that says these businesses are doing better or have a better chance and these businesses don't?
Well, gosh, I mean, there's so many reasons for why that is, and I think our research.
I will be here for a couple hours. You can take your time.
I mean, look, there's a lot of reasons for this. And again, it's not just the pandemic, but certainly we've seen lots of folks have documented that minority-owned businesses in New York and around the nation were hit harder. Many more of them closed during the pandemic. Many more of them were struggling to get through. And there's a lot of reasons for this. I think one of the things that we found is that, a smaller share of the minority-owned businesses in New York were developing, were taking advantage of technology, were embracing e-commerce, were reaching new customers at a time when that became increasingly important during this pandemic, when people stopped going into stores and restaurants and you had to kind of have new ways of reaching people. We found that going into that, fewer of the city's minority-owned businesses were ready to do that. Fewer had been doing that beforehand. But there's so many other reasons that we get into in terms of access to capital and starting with at a smaller level. We found that minority-owned businesses before the pandemic were generating less than half of the revenue on average as white-owned businesses in New York City. And there are a lot of reasons for that. We also found that minority-owned businesses in New York were on average not taking advantage of technical assistance and other small business assistance programs that are out there. And so it's no wonder why fewer of those businesses were stronger. Many of them were leaving opportunities on the table for growth. We have some great small business assistance programs, and we have two guests that really have been doing amazing work around.
And they know how to apply those things. This leads right. You saw a sample of just a couple of sections of the Bronx where there are small businesses. Ms. McLean, when I look at it, and I saw those, that looks like the Bronx to me. That's what we know. That's who's in our neighborhoods. I'm going to add something to what Mr. Bowles said is a very fundamental thing. If you serve a population that doesn't have a lot of capital, it's very hard to raise money. And so maybe you're starting without a large investment, without the capital to do that investment, but ultimately your ability to take is also not significant. Anyway, Ms. McLean, talk to me about the neighborhoods that WHEDco serves, and are small businesses important? These strips, they're all over the Bronx that we see. I mean, I could think of 165th in your neighborhood, 165th, 161st. I mean, you could just go on and on and on. Why are they so important to the lifeblood of the neighborhoods?
Gary, I'm so glad you asked that question. Here in the Bronx, as well as across the city, of course, our small businesses are reflective of our communities, our neighborhoods, our neighbors, our cultures, our families, our traditions. And so it's not just about where you go and shop. It's about the sense of community that you feel, as well as, of course, the very important thing of being able to find the goods and services that you need in your own neighborhood, as well as jobs. Our small businesses here in the Bronx and across the city, of course, and across the nation are really crucial to generating jobs for our communities. So we know that the economic vitality that small businesses bring to our neighborhoods is really critical. And, WHEDco works to bring to the South Bronx access to the resources that create thriving communities. And we do that in 3 different neighborhoods. In Highbridge Concourse, near Jerome Avenue. We do it over on Southern Boulevard, around our Interville Green building. That's in the Crotona East neighborhood. And we also do it in Melrose, near our newest building, Bronx Commons. And so we're working with businesses and have been for years in those neighborhoods, and certainly saw some of the things that you mentioned, that even before the pandemic, businesses were struggling. Businesses, had a hard time, I would say, just accessing information. That's one of the key things that we see on a day-to-day basis, that, even as you mentioned, access to capital. Small businesses don't know where to go to access capital. If they go to their local bank, if there is one in their neighborhood, which is an issue here in the Bronx, oftentimes they get turned away. So when we have reached out to, on a consistent basis, businesses in, the neighborhoods that I mentioned, we just know and hear of just the lack of information, the lack of awareness of the small business services that are available from the city as well as from different organizations. So really critical to our communities, and there's definitely a dearth of information to small businesses here in the borough that we see.
I'm going to ask you to help me introduce Dr. Tepelus's segment, because one of the proposals of the 10 that's in there is to build new infrastructure to support commercial districts that don't have business improvement districts, which is, of course, something that Dr. Tepelus knows. Why do you now? Here's the question: do you think that bids need to be established in these neighborhoods, or do you want to take kind of the philosophies that have come out of the most successful bids, like the one in Morris Park, and apply those whether they form a bid or not? So that's for you, Ms. McLean. We'll ask you to do that. And then, of course, we're going to ask Dr. Tepelus to talk about how hard she has to work to keep the bid going.
Yes.
But go ahead, Ms. McLean. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that, over our decade plus of working on commercial revitalization here in the Bronx, and just my experience with bids, like I know that bids they're not a panacea. So they do work for some districts that can support the resources that the bid requires, the assessments and the definitely the additional, outputs that come from a bid. That's certainly critical, whether it be security or additional marketing or technical assistance and support as well. But not every neighborhood is ready for a bid. The reality, and I'm sure Dr. Camelia will talk about this.
Sure. Well, let's throw it there, Dr. Tepelus. The difference, like what has the bid done, for example, in Morris Park? I mean, if you just say Morris Park Avenue, I think a lot of people will have an image in their mind. To me, part of that is the definition that has been given to it by the bid. We were talking about a lovely video that you did going from store to store. And those are the kinds of things that, gee, it would be nice to have. I mean, I used 165th Street or on Burnside Avenue. It'd be wonderful to have that. Talk to me about bids and what they bring, what they have brought to Morris Park, and what you think they could bring to the neighborhoods that Kerry and Jonathan are talking about.
Yes. Thank you for the question, Gary, and thank you so much for the comments before, which I truly and fully endorse. No single system of organization will be the solution for everything. But as far as bids are concerned, I mean, the magic and the power of the bids is the fact that we have a financial mechanism that gives us security that we will have our budget for the next year. And simple example for Morris Park, I mean, for years, community organization used to literally knock door to door to merchants to give them money to provide holiday lights. The bids get formed magically, holiday lights just happen without anybody getting stressed or feeling that they are being pressured to give money. I mean, this is incredible. I mean, I am able to provide masks. I was able to provide a home test kits. We were able to give so much technical assistance to our businesses, which then secure the vitality of the commercial corridor. My vacancy rate under COVID went down. I mean, my vacancy rate went down. I was before at a healthy level. Now I'm at an incredible level.
I have to contend one thing that you said. You said by magic. Now, it may feel like magic to the store owners, but we know that Dr. Tepelus is up there stringing lights. I mean, or in some form, making sure that happens. That's the kind of organization, I think, that can work. What are the challenges? Let's just say we were to say to you, and I'll use Burnside Avenue for an example. There's a huge shopping strip there. They probably could use a bid. What are the challenges for neighborhoods like the ones Ms. McLean and WHEDco serves to setting up a bid in those neighborhoods? Like, what's the first thing they got to figure out? To me, it's getting the buy-in, literal, physical, financial buy-in from store owners.
Yes, not from store owners, Gary, from commercial property owners.
That's correct.
Is a different class of people. Right. I mean, and even in Morris Park is kind of a low, medium level neighborhood, highly residential neighborhood. And we as a bid, by the way, operate more like a community organization that strictly as a bid in kind of the more commercial sense of the word. The biggest challenge is really educating property owners, along with small businesses, about what it means to have a bid and the benefits that they will obtain and that they will see and that the customers will see by having a bid in place. Even in a neighborhood as Morris Park, it took 6 years to get the bid together. 6 very long years to get the bid together. And then all of a sudden it's there, and now everybody loves it.
Everybody's talking
Why
about
didn't do
it. This fits right into what they did in this report. And we'll go back to Mr. Bowles about that. Because I didn't count the numbers out of the 10, but many of them involve this idea of information and communication. And I'm going to read one: create neighborhood level post-pandemic marketing campaigns to promote local shopping, dining, and services. So let's talk about the possibilities for doing these things. What would it take, Mr. Bowles, to create those kinds of programs for some of the neighborhoods and places that don't have a bid that I was referring to? So, Mr. Bowles, you can have a word on that, because you make a proposal. That's a nice idea. How do we do it?
Well, thanks for the question. And, I think you're right. I think actually really cutting across all of our recommendations is this idea that we really need to strengthen neighborhood level business support services. And we probably need to start by kind of working with the community-based organizations already on the ground that have the trust and the credibility in these communities. And to your question,
can I just interrupt? Are you suggesting then groups like WHEDco?
Absolutely. And the bid that acts as a
I had to
community
feel
service.
that it just was too obvious. I'm sorry. And Bronx works if you want. Go ahead.
That is a slam dunk for sure. But you brought up Burnside before, and we actually spoke to folks at the BJT commercial district, Burnside, Jerome, and Tremont, and they've been actually trying to get a bid for years. And look, I'm a huge supporter of bids. I believe in bids. That's a neighborhood commercial strip in Burnside where they would love to have a bid, but they're also taking a while to get to that place. But before then, why as a city should we kind of not have enough resources in place to support those businesses? And there may be some communities that just don't want a bid, period.
So I've got to ask you, because to me, it's a glaring question. It seems to me, and among the notes that you have, your items for the mayor, spark 10,000 new Black and Hispanic owned businesses by 2026. If you're asking me to vote, I vote yes. The problem is it's a financial thing, right? I mean, you've got what you're really saying here in total, it seems to me, allocate more money to small businesses. Be aware that this is a problem. Ms. McLean, you want to talk about that, about the financial aspects here? Because that's what you're asking. And of course, where does the money come from? I mean, this starts it's an issue. Definitely.
And I so espouse the recommendation of Center for Urban Futures for a technical assistance score. We really need to undergird our commercial districts and our communities with experts. They're, people who've graduated with their bachelor's in business administration or master's in business administration, or just have a love of community and can counsel and advise and coach and do outreach and provide support and technical assistance, marketing, website help, all of those things that organizations like ours, going back to your question of money, struggle to spend the time that's needed. Fortunately, on my team, we have someone who can help with websites, but it literally takes like 8 to 10 hours to get somebody's website up. Doing the initial training is one thing, but then walking hand in hand with the small business owner, it's like 8, 10, 15 hours.
Listen, I got to tell you that this is the borough of universities, and you can do this on your own. There are 14 of them in the Bronx, and you can count and figure out which one is which. And there are some, certainly in the South Bronx, whether it be Hostos, Bronx Community College. I mean, even, talking about the publics, Lehman would serve that part of the Bronx, obviously. There are students who can do it, but of course, they can't work for free, and that's again, we're going back around to the money question. Dr. Tepelus, let's just talk a little bit about the bids. You told me, and the financial structure of this, you told me in a telephone call we had prior to the program that the money comes out of the city. Talk to me about kind of how this works, and then we'll go back to Mr. Bowles and see how we're trying to solve problems here, and maybe we can work together and get some ideas going. So how does the money work for the bid that it could be potentially applied to some of these districts?
Yeah. The money doesn't come out of the city. The money comes via the city, which is a very different thing. Yeah, the money is an assessment, an additional tax, essentially, that commercial property owners see on their tax bill. So that money goes to the City Department of Finance, and the City Department of Finance via SBS provides for each bid the money corresponding to their geographic district. In the case of Morris Park, we have 21 blocks on Morris Park Avenue between Unionport and Williamsbridge Road. Those commercial property owners agreed to this supplementary tax that they pay to create a bid and to create the bid budget that is limited in the ways it's being used to provide additional services, not to replace city services, supplementary services to the services that the city provides. And that supplementary sanitation, very important, cleanliness, key component to quality of life, supplementary sanitation, district marketing,
security is a big thing,
and safety. And on top of it, it's advocacy for small businesses to city agencies.
Mr. Bowles, is there legislative support? Because, to do what you're going to need, it takes a village, so to speak. Is there a legislative support for the 10 points in your plan? There was one of interest to me that I wanted to ask about, but talk to me about legislative support. Is it there?
I mean, we're working with this new city council members on that legislative support right now. But I would say that, first of all, to the point about money, there's no question that you're right. Money is really important. The Department of Small Business Services has a lower budget than pretty much every other city agency right now. It's $400 million a year.
I would say, I wonder if it's other than parks. If I'd have to go compare.
It's about 2/3 the size of the parks budget.
Really fascinating.
It's lower than the library's budget. It's lower than the Department for the Aging budget. I think those are other important agencies, and I'm not arguing for less money for those. But a small increase for local organizations to provide technical assistance and work directly with small businesses on things like the internet and getting access to websites and e-commerce, like Kerry was talking about, would go such a long way. We're not asking.
I'm sorry. I just have to ask, because it makes sense if we're talking about reinvigorating our neighborhoods after the pandemic. You got to make some kind of investment. And I was not aware that the budget was that small. It seems to me that's where you put the money in, and a little more funding could help. Water the grass and get some flowers. It could
help trigger investment. It could help catalyze jobs.
Oh, I like this.
It could strengthen neighborhoods at a time when so many are really fragile right now coming out of the pandemic. It is a really smart investment we should be making. And the amounts don't have to be large. You mentioned the kind of, the grants that we asked for neighborhood-based organizations to do marketing campaigns to encourage shopping in these districts after the pandemic. We were talking about like a $25,000 grant for a bunch of different neighborhood organizations to do the kind of local place-based marketing campaigns that they think is best. That's a really small amount of money spread across the city. These are things that we can do.
Ms. McLean, when you move around now and talk to people in the businesses, are you trying to do some of these things, communicate where they can get funding? And it seems to me the size of the job, I mean, you wouldn't even have time to do a half-hour program with us if you were knocking on everybody's door and trying to educate them. Is it possible to get out there and do this, without an infusion of extra dollars?
We really need that infusion of extra dollars. We have been making it work, Gary, because that's what we as nonprofits do, is that we make it work when our community has hopes and visions and needs, and we're here to, be the conduit to help respond to them. But certainly it's a commitment by our organization to raise philanthropic dollars, as well as to seek city support to do this work and to fund staff to be able to go door to door, which even during the pandemic, we have been trying to do as safely, of course, safety being priority. But we know that in-person contact, that's critical, of course, supplemented by phone calls and by, the virtual media that we've had to include during this time. But critically, resources and the lack thereof, and access to more resources for us as organizations, as well as access to resources and capital and grants for the businesses themselves.
I thought that Mr. Bowles made a really compelling point, saying the budget is just too small. We're asking for money. We're asking for funding. $400 million. I mean, given the size of the job is... Wow, that's a shocking number to me. I got to ask Dr. Tepelus this question. It's really a little bit off the beaten track, but it gives you the kind of idea that of what bids need. Number one, and we're running out of time, so give me 30 or 45 seconds on it. Why did your vacancy rate increase? That's an interesting thing to know. And number two, did the road diet that they did, which was a big concern coming in, did it hurt, did it help, or have no effect on business?
My vacancy rate decreased, Gary.
Yes, I'm sorry, it decreased.
From 8.41%, quote unquote, shockingly healthy, according to 3 different agencies' inspections, to 6.95%.
And why was that? Did you have a reason?
Because of conjunctional factors, actually. Some related to COVID, some related to my geography, because I don't have much infrastructure in terms of transportation. So people all of a sudden were trapped in their own neighborhood and using their own local stores.
And just to answer the question, the road diet hurt, it helped, or it had no effect on business?
I think I already gave you the numbers. I don't know if I can attribute the growth to the road diet in conjunction with
some
COVID,
of my friends
but it didn't hurt. And we are now having the latest gadget. You have to do a show on this only.
All right. Well, we did do it when it was proposed. Some of my friends who own businesses were very concerned. All right, let's wrap it up, Dr. Bowles. The word, what's the bottom line message? You got about 30 seconds to do it.
Look, we're already seeing a renaissance of new businesses opening right now. We need to make sure that minority-owned businesses, Black and Latino businesses, especially entrepreneurs, are part of that. We also need to do a lot more to strengthen existing minority businesses. Make sure that if another major crisis or pandemic, or God forbid something else like this comes again, that our small businesses are better prepared, that are more resilient and more competitive.
Because that will keep our neighborhood strong. That'll keep the finances in the city strong. Ms. McLean, just for WHEDco, you're just going to keep fighting the fight on the legislative end and just kind of working as hard as you can, right? There's nothing else?
Always. And in all ways.
All right, fair enough. And Dr. Tepelus, any new programs, anything going on? You got about 15 seconds. I'm watching the clock.
I have too much for 15 seconds, but I'm announcing next week my Morris Park and Varnes commercial needs assessment, and I would be happy to share that with you.
All right, we'll do that. Listen, you guys are great. From the Jonathan Bowles, the Center for Urban Future, Kerry McLean from WHEDco, and Dr. Tepelus from the Morris Park bid. That's it. Let's shop local, strong local, love the Bronx, spend your money in the Bronx. And that's how we do it. We're going to make ourselves, we're going to fight our way out of this. We've had issues and we've had problems, and we know what happened over there on 181st Street, heartbreaking, but we're going to work together and fight together. Stay safe, wear your mask, get vaccinated, get boosted, and we'll see you next week. Good night.